Day 663 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzy here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at the Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 348,000 military personnel losses, which makes an additional 1,150 losses in the past day. So it's almost consistently been keeping above that 1,000 mark for the past month, largely due to a fair number of frontline clashes at the moment near, say, Kupiansk, Bakhmut, Avdiivka, Marinka, to name but a few. Then as for hardware losses, 15 tanks, 19 APVs and 15 artillery, and one air defense system, which I'll show you guys shortly as well. So to the map we go, and starting out in the south of Bakhmut, as it turns out that those reported Russian gains just west of the canal from where Krynky is were pretty insignificant, or technically non-existent. And if I put up the satellite map right here, there we go. So as you might see there, it's actually quite the choke point to get to the west of the canal, making it difficult for Russian forces to pass through if they are indeed doing any real offensive operations in this sector. And it's really not much of a surprise that the battle lines are drawn right here based on this artificially constructed waterway. Which reminds me of an old meme I created when we were discovering that the Russian forces had some considerable operational limitation concerns when it came to crossing rivers or other various water bodies. Then moving down, and as for a change of pace, when we take a look at Avdiivka, where battles are most fierce right now, as Vitaly Barabash, head of the Avdiivka City Military Administration for Ukraine, recently spoke of a short to medium term positive outlook for the region, stating, quote, "The Russian Federation will not be able to seize Avdiivka even before the presidential elections of the Russian Federation, which are scheduled for March next year." And so sentiment like that tends to suggest that this location will continue to be quite the notable black hole for Russian personnel and hardware for some time. So even with the artillery shell supply crunch that Ukraine is currently experiencing, and to be fair, Russia certainly has its fair share of issues on that front too, but still Ukraine manages to hold its own here. And on the topic of artillery shells, they're actually quite a lot more expensive than you may think. For instance, the price per shell based off a recent German Rheinmetall production contract fulfillment put the standard 155mm shells at a cost of about 3,300 euros each. So for cheaper shells to exist in the marketplace, it's simply a question of scaling up production to significantly larger volumes, which takes time. But there is something else that exists that's incredibly more accurate and costs less than a tenth of these shells. Enter the drones. Now, accuracy and low cost per unit currently does come at the cost of a lower yield bang, but even so, as little as one or two Ukrainian FPV drones has verifiably been enough to take out even the heaviest of Russian armor, such as the T-90M main battle tank. Then briefly, moving a bit further south to Marinka, we saw the AFU repelling a Russian attack in this region using a Javelin ATGM, so the anti-tank guided missiles, to hit the lead vehicle of a convoy of Russian heavy armor. And it really is hard to imagine the actual psychological impact of seeing the point vehicle of your armored column getting obliterated right in front of you. Then, somewhere else in the east, there seemed to be the spotting of a confusing photo of an abandoned Russian T-72 tank, with it being the upgraded 2022 variant, right next to an old T-55 tank, it appears. So, bearing in mind, these tanks are about 60 years old. and this one specifically appears to be missing any sort of upgrades. Then somewhere else in the east, as promised, we saw from the Ukrainian 14th Separate Regiment the destruction of a Russian Zytel jamming complex and a radar for a Buk M2 air defense system and a Buk M3 complex, which is impressive. So basically, Russia lost an entire air defense battery and electronic warfare system to some Ukrainian drones and some GMLRS HIMARS fire. Then moving across to the Robotina front, as although nothing's changed in terms of frontline positions, Russian forces are performing quite a lot of efforts west and south of the settlement in an attempt to regain previously lost positions. But it just was another not great day for them. Then for a moment, we will move across to the outskirts of Krynky in the Kherson Oblast as a Russian T-90M main battle tank was attacked by 2 Ukrainian FPV drones, then abandoned by its crew. And it's important to remember a couple of things here. So firstly, this is the best tank that Russia has to offer in this war, and really any war for that matter. Then second of all, the Russian tank name, the T-90, is really quite something of a misnomer, as the Russian T-90 tank, due to being based directly off the Russian T-72 tank, was initially going to be named the T-72BU tank, which tells you everything you need to know about how modern and effective the T-90 tank is, especially given its uninspiring performance in this war. Then a bit of a shorter video today, so we'll move across to some news now. So new aid has been pledged by Denmark and Sweden, mainly for the procurement of newly built CV-90 infantry fighting vehicles. Now, currently, Ukraine has received about 50 of these Swedish-produced IFVs, with another 50 said to be provided from this deal as well. Then in some other news, Russia's central bank has increased its key interest rate to 16% just a few days ago to fight, quote, high inflationary pressures. And it's not surprising really, as the cost of war on Russia has inflated the price of most goods within the country. It's actually been quite well documented now. So, rest in peace to those in Russia that have a mortgage or a personal loan. Not to mention the vastly raised cost of living, which will make it genuinely more difficult for them to buy that bottle of vodka to get that much needed reprieve from the wide-reaching situational fallout for their economy due to Putin's invasion of Ukraine. Then in some other news, so residents of the Irkutsk Oblast in Russia are facing severe cold weather and question why they are suffering from the cold and constant power outages, while Europe doesn't face similar issues despite not having Russian gas. As such, they recorded a video message for President Putin and his end-of-year 4-hour-long conference that he held just last weekend, which was designed to address these types of concerns from the country. However, unsurprisingly, he did not address this video's concern. And so the obvious irony here is how the ongoing Russian narrative and the Russian propaganda machine inside of Russia has constantly made the point of how Europe will freeze in the winter without Russian gas. And sure, you might say, well, this is Siberia, what do they expect? Well, apart from Russia having all of those gas reserves, and apart from this dog, also in Siberia, that found a hot pipe to try and keep his most precious things warm, this issue is not only isolated to Siberian Russia, because in the Moscow district of Chertonovo, buildings have been reportedly out of power routinely. And even in the Elektrostal suburb of Moscow, the people have made an appeal to Putin, another video appeal, stating that heating has not been working since the very beginning of the heating season. In fact, they also stated that this is the 3rd year in a row that this has happened now, which is long before any full-scale Ukrainian invasion occurred. So if Russia couldn't get its act together before the war, little hope could be said for it now. Then moving across to a bit of a quick and different kind of a funny today. So according to a new Russian presidential decree signed by Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin himself, Moldovans, Belarusians and Kazakhs can now gain Russian citizenship without fulfilling previous requirements, such as a 5-year residence in Russia or knowledge of Russian history and laws. So, wow, desperate much? But let's not sugarcoat this one. And also, I'm pretty sure that these countries' nationals are aware of really what's going on here, which is that this free Russian citizenship gets you one thing and one thing only: a free trip to the front lines. Not very enticing at all. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks for watching. I'm really appreciating the likes and the comments, so yeah, thanks again for that and all of the support. I can't really still thank you enough at all, and I really do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers!